Inverse function. Do not forget to subscribe. The process we will describe to find inverse functions were met briefly when we learned how to change the subject of a formula. Now we will go deep inside in the subject. An inverse function is a function that will undo anything that the original function does. Take a look at in the following functions. Let's find f of 3. 3 belongs to the domain of a function f, and 7 belongs to the range of a function f. We see that function f takes 3 to 7. Now let's find g of 7. 7 belongs to the domain of g, and 3 belongs to the range of g. The function g takes 7 to 3. The function f receives an input value and creates an output answer. The function g takes that output answer and arrives back at the original function's starting input value. Clearly, we notice that the function g undoes or reverses what the function f has done. So, g of x is the inverse of f of x, and we can denote g of x equals f inverse of x. The inverse of f of x is f inverse of x. It reverses the action of that function. The original function f of x and the inverse function are functions. This means that for both functions, there can only be one image for each element in the domain. This can be illustrated in the following mapping. Consider a function f. If we put a single value of x, we find a single value of y. The mapping is clearly a function, since for every input there is one and only one output. Now we consider a function f inverse of x. If we put a single value of y, we find a single value of x. The reverse mapping is also a function because for any input there is one and only one output. This type of mapping is called one-to-one. Therefore, a function f may or may not have an inverse function. The condition for a function f to have an inverse function is that, over the given domain, f represents a one-to-one mapping. Given a f of x, an inverse exists only if there is a one-to-one correspondence between domain and range in the function. Functions that have this property are called one-to-one. Pay attention in the following examples. Function f does not have an inverse. G of x function does not have an inverse as well. Let's learn how to find out the algebraic form of the inverse function. The process is done almost the same way to change the subject of a formula. Find the inverse function of f. Follow the steps. Write y equals f of x. Replace f of x with y. Interchange x and y. Make y the subject. Let's solve for y. Subtract 9, divide by 3, and switch sides. Replace y with f inverse of x. Find the inverse function of f. Replace f of x with y. Interchange x and y in the equation. Solve for y. Replace y with f inverse of x.